I'm Deepthi Sharma, and today I have taken a news piece from Economic Times dated November 11th, 2022. So the article is about BOP. Let me first read the article, okay? BOP likely to drop, time to rein in CAD. India's balance of payments, BOP, is likely to slip into $40-50 billion deficit in the current fiscal. The reason is the widening goods trade imbalance that may not get bridged by the invisible surplus, largely software exports and inward remittances, and capital inflows that are expected to be muted this fiscal. Okay, so my purpose of taking this article is basically to make you understand that what's BOP, what's current account, what's capital account or financial account, and why our current account is so important, or why the current account is important for a nation. All right. Okay, before that, before I go into what's CAD and why it's bad or why it's good, right? Let me give you a brief outline of what's BOP, what's current account, and what's capital account or financial account. Okay, so BOP, that's balance of payments. Now, balance of payments is actually an accounting record of the inflows and outflows of a nation with respect to the rest of the world. Now, rest of the world, I'll keep saying ROW for short, right? So, balance of payment just tells you that. Now, in that, any kind of inflows of payments, transactions that produce any kind of inflow of payments are known as credit transactions and they carry a positive sign. However, any transactions that produce an outflow of payments, they are debit transactions and they carry a negative sign. All right, that's the basic of BOP. That's the basic of balance of payments. So it's basically an accounting record of the inflows and outflows of a nation with respect to the rest of the world. Now, these inflows and outflows are generated by trading goods and services and purchases of financial assets. All right. So if any inflow of payments is taking place, that's a credit transaction and it will carry a positive sign. Any outflow of payments is taking place, then that's a debit transaction and it carries a negative sign. Okay. Now let me come to the current account. Okay. Remember this. Now let me come to the current account. So current account is basically the exports and imports of goods and services, and they represent the purchase and sale of goods and services produced in the current period. So that's why they are called current account. Okay, so what does that mean? That basically means that if there are any exports from a country, okay, so we are exporting goods and in return we are receiving payments. So since an inflow of payments is a credit transaction and it carries a positive sign, so that's why I have written positive sign in front of exports. Okay. Now, the other thing is imports. So, if there are any imports, since we are importing goods, we are taking goods from outside, right? So, for that, we have to make payments outside. So, there is an outflow of payments that's going to take place. It's a debit transaction and so it carries a negative sign. So, that's why I have written a negative sign in front of it. So, exports are a positive for current account, imports are a negative for current account. Okay, apart from this, the current account also includes, net income from any kind of investment earning, from any kind of investments, right, that you have made abroad or any labor earnings. So it's not the investment, but it's the income on that investment that you earn that goes in the current account. Okay, any kind of investment that you do will be going into another account. We'll discuss that later. But any income on that investment will come into your current account. So it's a net income. That basically means that there could be an inflow or there could be an outflow also, right? So the net of that comes into your current account. Okay. So from investments, any kind of investments, but the income on those investments, right? And labor earnings. And then the third, we have the net transfers. Now, net transfers basically means any private gifts that are sent to India from abroad or which are sent from India to abroad. So the net of that is recorded in your current account. Okay, and then the balance on current account is given by all these three. Okay, so exports, imports, net income and net transfers, and that gives you the balance on current account. All right, so now let's go to what we call the financial account. So what do you mean by financial account? So financial account includes, or the capital account includes, the movement of funds due to the purchase and sale of financial assets are called your financial account transactions, right? Like you have purchase of treasury bills. So let's say from India, right, Indian government, it purchases, or Indians purchases treasury bills abroad in US, right? So there is an outflow of payment. Okay, so if you are purchasing something, then there is an outflow of payment. So that is recorded as a negative in the financial account. So any transaction that involves purchasing or selling or buying and selling of your financial accounts will come in financial assets, or you will come in your financial account or capital account. So that's why I've written foreign owned Indian assets, right? So if the foreigners are buying Indian treasury bills, right? If foreigners are buying Indian treasury bills, then they are paying us. So that's why it carries a positive sign. Okay, that's why it carries a positive sign. So foreign owned Indian assets carry a positive sign because there is an inflow of payment coming in this case. It could be a portfolio or real asset, anything. But if there is Indians owing assets abroad, right? If Indians are buying abroad any kind of financial assets, then there's an outflow of payment. So that's a portfolio, either portfolio or real. So that's why it carries a negative sign. All right. Okay, and then the balance of this gives us the balance on financial account. Okay, so I'll just quickly go over it again. So BOP is inflow of payments. If there is a credit transaction, positive sign. Outflow of payments, debit sign. Debit transaction, negative sign. Then majorly BOP has two accounts. Current account, the first current account, okay, exports, positive, imports, negative. Net income and net transfers, and all these give us the balance on current account. Okay. The second major account in BOP is your financial account, and that is this one. Foreign owned Indian assets will give you a positive sign, right? Because there is an inflow of payment. Indians owning assets abroad will give us a negative sign because there is an outflow of payment, and these give us balance on financial account. Okay. Now, one thing that you have to really understand is that there's an important relationship in the BOP is that any inflow of funds is going to be matched by an equal and opposite outflow of funds. So since inflow is equal to the outflow, the entire BOP is always going to be equal. That is, net BOP is equal to 0. Alright, so subsets of the BOP can be positive or negative, right? That is, I can say that current account can be positive or negative, or capital account can be positive or negative. But in that case, what should happen is that, let's say if a current account is in deficit or surplus, but the remaining categories will be exactly equal and opposite to that, so that the entire BOP is net out to 0. Alright, so that's why I have written, if you just see my bottom line, is that BOP is 0. So not 0, literally it doesn't mean 0, it basically means that BOP is always in balance, right? Okay. Alright, so now I come to the point that what is current account deficit? So CAD basically refers to, in the article, it refers to your current account deficit. Okay. So deficit basically means that current account is deficit. It could be because of your imports being greater than your exports, which basically means that there is an outflow of payments is more than your inflow of payments on your current account. All right. Okay. This current account deficit basically reflects changes in indebtedness of a nation. Okay, so it tells us about the indebtedness of a nation. Now, what does that mean? That basically means, okay, so I'll start with an example. Let's say there's a current account deficit. Now, there are two ways through which we can bridge this gap, right, of current account deficit. Either the central bank of a country draw down its forex reserves, okay, but this action actually puts pressure on the rupee, on the currency of whatever country is following that, right? In case of India, it's rupee. So that puts pressure on the currency, and that will hamper the export sector again. And that's not good when already the current country is going through the current account deficit. All right. So the second thing is that the second option is that we are borrowing funds from rest of the world. That's ROW, in order to finance our current account deficit. So in order to finance this current account deficit, we basically borrowing funds from rest of the world, right? Now that basically means that there is an inflow of funds on the financial account, right? Current account in deficit, I just told you that financial account then has to be a positive so that the entire BOP is in balance. So borrowing of funds from ROW basically means there's an inflow of funds into our country, but since we are borrowing it from ROW, so our indebtedness increases, right? But yes, that makes our BOP in balance, okay? So what basically we are trying to say is that, so a wider a CAD is, right? So a wider a CAD is, then the higher the indebtedness to ROW. So basically your current account deficit increasing our indebtedness to ROW, right? So the wider the current account deficit becomes, the higher the indebtedness to ROW, because we are borrowing funds from rest of the world in order to make our balance of payments in balance. All right. Okay. So I'll just repeat that once again, right? How current account deficit relates to the indebtedness and why is it so important. So the first thing is that current account deficit is basically that when there are more of outflows of payments as compared to the inflow of payments, right? Then it's a deficit. Now that could be because of we are having higher imports as compared to our exports, okay? The current account deficit reflects changes in indebtedness of a nation. That's why it's a matter of concern, right? And this increasing the indebtedness to ROW basically because we are borrowing funds from ROW in order to finance a current account deficit. That's why we say that we are increasing our indebtedness to ROW, right? Now this is not a very stable macroeconomic condition for a country to attract foreign direct investment, or for that matter to attract any kind of investment, right? A country has to have stable macroeconomic conditions, right? Only then the investors will have confidence in a nation, in a country, to invest there. So having a higher current account deficit, a wider current account deficit, is not a very good sign of stable macroeconomic condition for a country, because that basically means higher indebtedness to rest of the world, right? So that's what we are looking at, and that's what we should now. It's time to have a control on your CAD. Now, if you read the article, at the end of the article says that we can increase that by increasing our export competitiveness in services or in manufacturing, right? And I completely agree with it. Manufacturing of goods, right? So increasing our export competitiveness is one of the ways through which we can actually have a current account deficit control. Okay. All right. So I hope this session was productive and you really liked it. And keep listening to me and keep watching my videos. And please do subscribe. And that's it for now. Okay. See you.